Good afternoon, all. Good afternoon, all. Good vibes, man. Buenos dias a todos. It's a pleasure to be here. And I was given the opportunity to speak for a half hour. I've taken the liberty to prepare a speech of 15 minutes out of respect for the limited attention of some participants. But my name is Amilka Sanatan. I'm the Assistant Director for Gender Affairs and Gender and Child Affairs in the Office of the Prime Minister in Trinidad and Tobago. The length of my title doesn't reflect my pay. But today, I will be speaking in the capacity as advisor to the Caribbean Development Bank's Future Leaders Network. So I take the opportunity to recognize my colleague, Ms. Gillian Rowe here from Barbados, who's the representative for Barbados. So big up Gillian as well here from the bank, a proud sponsor for today's event. In 2017, the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago passed legislation to ban child marriage. It harmonized varying legal ages of marriage in our multi-ethnic and multicultural nation-state. The amendment of the Marriage Act brought the legal age of marital unions up to 18 years old. In parliamentary debates, it was said that 3,478 child marriages were recorded by the Registrar General between 1996 and 2016. 98% of these cases involved girls. Though there is legislative change on child marriage, a culture of the sexual exploitation of minors, sexual violence against girls, transactional sex, and violence and power disparities in sexual and economic relations, it afflicts people in Trinidad and Tobago and, of course, the Caribbean. Everyday realities of adult men dropping off lunches and buying prepaid minutes for cell phones for their Form 2 and Form 3 wives and smallies through school gates as part of a grooming strategy. And boys who are victimized by older women and men as they suffer in silence because of a larger culture of shame, patriarchal manhood, and the social legitimacy of early sexual initiation for boys. These illustrate the challenges of our time. These are the crimes that are prevalent in our societies. They also present socio-legal entanglements. For example, consent can be understood as a legal term with a legal definition. What is the age of consent? Who has the power to consent? And if minors cannot legally consent to certain practices, do we establish barriers to teach young people about a culture of consent, sexual education, and gender inequalities around intimate partner relationships in the household and in public? 44% of ever partnered women have experienced intimate partner violence in Trinidad and Tobago. Rates throughout the region show 55% in Guyana, 48% in Suriname, and 39% in Grenada. This is currently higher than the global average of 1 in 3 women and girls experiencing gender-based violence. Alarmingly, 92% of reports of women and girls who were victims of sexual violence in Trinidad and Tobago were under the ages of 35 years old. Against this background, in September of this year, a 13-year-old girl from an agricultural community in Trinidad participated in an identification parade at a police station to identify a person who allegedly raped her in 2022. When she returned home, hours later, gunmen murdered her and her uncle. Her father was fatally wounded. Her name was Andrea. Today, I dedicate this presentation to the memory of Andrea, a 13-year-old whose fate was inscribed in a criminal justice system that was unable to respond to her realities, and a culture that condemns young women and men lives without peace. So intersectionality is both a concept and analytical tool which recognizes that the experiences of systemic inequalities are shaped by overlapping factors such as gender, race, class, sexuality. Intersectionality grapples with the multiple social advantages and disadvantages in a given time and space. Power relations are dynamic. Our lives are not experienced by one single social identity. The social outcomes for a male 15-year-old secondary student in Queen's College from a middle-class background may vary from another 15-year-old female adolescent mother whose education was disrupted by pregnancy and was unable to access second and third opportunities to education? Are we prepared to make visible the differences among social groups in the Caribbean legal and policy analysis? What are the perspectives of domestic workers, migrants within and beyond the CSME framework, disabled people, people living with HIV, as they imagine a modern criminal justice system? PAL Americas proposes a checklist of questions for law and policymakers applying an intersectional analysis, and this is included in my presentation, which I can share subsequently. The Caribbean Development Bank's Youth Policy and Operational Strategy of 2022 recognizes intersectionality as one of its key principles. I would like the outcome of this conference to do the same. It explicitly states that implementation must integrate intersectionality, gender responsiveness, and social inclusion. In concrete terms, intersectional analysis strengthens our response to crime and violence as well as our understanding of the political economy of violence. For example, climate change alongside militarized conflicts, as seen in Ukraine and Russia, have exacerbated food insecurity globally and disrupted production and commodity chains. In Suriname, St. Lucia, Jamaica, Haiti, any Caribbean country where there are rigid gender roles and an unequal division of labor in the household, challenges with procuring food, intersecting with gender inequalities, can worsen conditions in homes, put women and children at risk to gender-based violence due to conflicts over food preparation and economic strain. Similarly, legislation that considers cybercrimes as attacks on business or gender-neutral notions of privacy of the individual can miss the complex digital realities of Caribbean people, especially our youth. Technology facilitated gender-based violence, which takes place in the form of online shaming, revenge pornography, online sexual harassment in the workplace, and deception that could lead to human trafficking, especially the trafficking of non-nationals in our countries. Intersectionality as a concept and analytical tool sophisticates legislation and policy in the Caribbean to redress gender-neutral and gender exclusionary frameworks. So gender inequalities and the reality of youth as perpetrators, victims, and survivors of crime and violence require a sophistication of our legislative and policy agendas at the national level. I propose the following towards the achievement of a modern criminal justice system. 1. Strengthen the capacity for data collection in government. Significant resources need to be directed to government for data collection and analysis. The current norms related to reports without country-specific, analytical, and prevalent studies limit the capacity of the public sector agencies to have ongoing and responsive legislative and policy review. Moreover, in spite of decades-long advocacy and agreements to the collection of sex disaggregated data, governments generally fall short in producing data points that reflect age, sex, and geography. I don't need to know how many people benefit from a program or are suffering in it. That's a number. What is the sex? What is the age? Where are they from? Addressing this across social sectors will improve the effective monitoring of social inclusions and exclusions. We need to mainstream gender equality frameworks in legislation and policy. And this would ensure that legislation and policies apply non-sexist, gender-sensitive language, collect sex disaggregated data. Everybody talking about he, thief. If the judge, he makes a decision. Even the language we have produced today, which I understand is normative in a legal fraternity, could be transformed for the Caribbean in the 21st century. Gender analyses on differential experiences and outcomes for women, girls, men, and boys, but also promoting the leadership of women and girls in decision-making, as we generally have to pursue the transformation of gender stereotypes to ensure equality of access in all spheres of social and economic life. To speak of this matter truthfully, it has become a norm for countries to sign on to international declarations on the elimination of violence of women and girls. They develop gender equality policies and never introduce these obligations into wider government policy. It is rather common to find a policy that is 100 pages in length and mention the words gender and gender equality 3 or 4 times on a picture SCG 5, which is gender equality. If you didn't know, you probably didn't read it in your policy. For this reason, gender and law and gender and public policy sensitization for sustained review of all legislation and policy are critical. Third, develop women peace and security, as well as youth peace and security plans. The United Nations Department of Political and Peace-Building Affairs established the WPS and the YPS frameworks to increase the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women in conflict prevention and peace building. Achieving a modern criminal justice system in the Caribbean directs our political attention and public resources to peace building in the region. WPS and YPS respond to the structural barriers that limit the effective leadership of women and youth in peace-building efforts. My final recommendation: prioritize gender-based violence in high-level national and regional security decision-making fora. Gender-based violence is a global development challenge, and the Caribbean is not exempt from this problem. The persistent exclusion of gender-based violence from high-level security fora relegates the issue to something attitudinal and a minor development issue. It is precisely the lack of gendered knowledge and analysis in public discourse that leads to the marginalization of GBV in high-level fora and its weak regional and national responses to solve the problem. We have made advances, but they are not enough. Is there anyone present today who can raise their hand and state that they do not know someone, a family member or friend, who has been a victim or survivor of gender-based violence? As the EU-funded Spotlight Initiative closes in December 2023, Caribbean leaders are tasked with meeting a sustainable long-term investment in combating gender-based violence. In conclusion, I would like to impress upon you, leaders of public sector, development, and social sectors, the significance of mainstreaming intersectional analyses as part of a wider gender analysis on the material and symbolic relations, outcomes, and experiences of Caribbean people, especially our youth, to effectively combat and transform crime and violence in our societies. This issue will not go away at the end of this conference, at the end of this year, and even in some of our lifetimes. The road out of this state of non-peace in households and communities is a long and winding one. Since we are gathered here in this fine hotel, the lunch, we'll discuss that in another forum. The Eagles' 1970s hit song would make a lot of sense to a number of delegates here reflecting on the difficulty of reversing regional trends of injustice, crime, and norms around violence. In Hotel California, you can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. Until we appreciate that border protection to limit gun trafficking in our territories is as important to the cause of expanding the masculine imagination and ideologies of young men on street corners with guns and leaders of business and chambers bragging about their possession of legal firearms. We will produce technocratic plans and policies that fail to address gaps in our Caribbean realities. And until we see sexual harassment against girls in school uniforms, on bus stands and transportation hubs as a crime and an infringement on a child's right to peace, safety, and education, we will fail to manifest the aim of this conference, which is to achieve a modern criminal justice system. El derecho de vivir en paz, ni una menos. We all have the right to live in peace. Thank you.